Thank you. Good morning. One quick thing here. Oops, can you hear me? Is this thing working? Cool. Good morning. A couple of quick things. First, thank you, Jeannie and Nelson and Sierra for having me and coordinating all this really nicely. And also thank you, you'll see in a second why, usually when you invite a keynote speaker comes to share some knowledge, something they supposedly know, or to give a pep talk or something like that. This is going to be different. I know nothing and I will depress you. No, it's going to be different. No, it'll be different because what I'll do this morning is actually share an idea with you and see what you think. And hopefully we'll have some time to hear what you think. I'll try to get through it as quickly as I can. If I speak too quickly, just go like that and I'll try to slow down. So I'm going to jump right in. So this title that you see here, how we can work together for a greater impact, or if you put a question mark on it, how can we work together for a greater impact, has been basically obsessing me since I was 24 years old, which is a long time ago. It led me to start Idealist, and I think today, in a time of scarcity, it's even more important than usual. We know that we have a lot of stuff, lots of ideas, lots of resources, lots of goodwill, and I think all of us at some level feel that we could and should be able to do more with this. The question is how. So what we're going to do today is very quickly look at the world as it is now. We can summarize it in one word, it's a mess, but we'll go a bit deeper. We're going to imagine a slightly different world where all of us, I think, can do more together, and then we'll see how we can get from here to there. I also want to say I'm really excited by this opportunity because at the end of next week, we're actually going to be launching this thing I'm going to talk about today. And so it's wonderful to be able to actually share it with you here, and you'll be seeing it online by the end of next week. Oh, and sorry, I'm so excited that I forgot to basically say hello. So, how many people in the room know a little bit about Idealist.org or have been on the site, know what it is? Okay, if you don't know what it is, ask the person on your left. No, seriously, Idealist.org is probably the biggest sort of nonprofit resource on the web. It was launched in '95. It's essentially a matching system between nonprofits all over the world who want to find people to work with them, volunteer with them, intern with them, but they want to promote their work, their mission, their events, their programs. And so there's about 85,000 nonprofits around the world that use it. They post a profile and then they update it whenever they want. And about 70,000 people every day come to the site to find those kind of things. Very, very briefly, you can come to the site, you can search, you can browse. You can also set up a little profile for yourself and say, hi, my name is Nelson. I'm interested in the environment. I want to volunteer in India next summer. You leave your profile there. Every night, the site matches all the listings by nonprofits like yours with all those profiles. And then every night, we send out about 200,000 emails to people that say, Nelson, good morning. Here are the 3 opportunities that interest you. Take it from there. All that is free. Fortunately, a server sends those 200,000 emails. Sometimes we get an email in the morning that says, thank you for that wonderful email that you sent me. No, we don't have little gnomes sitting all night writing 200,000 emails. It's actually done by a server. But that's what the site is very briefly. I don't want to spend too much time on that. You can check it out. It's idealist.org. So the world as it is right now, really quickly, I'm just going to touch. We don't have a lot of time, so I'm just going to touch on a few things to make sure that we're all on the same page and then keep going forward. So we're living in a very special moment right now. I think we're in the middle of Silicon Valley. All of you know what's behind me to be true. We've never had so many tools to communicate and work together. We started giving these kind of workshops 10, 15 years ago when we started in New York, and would ask a room, how many people have email? And half the people sort of would raise their hands, or a third of the people would raise their hands. Today I can ask you, you raise your hand, how many of you are on Facebook? Wow. LinkedIn? Amazing. Twitter. Okay, but you've started hearing that name out there. And the numbers are sort of mind-boggling. We're talking about almost 2 billion people online. No one actually knows for sure. Close to 4 billion handsets out there. It's insane. In January alone, 15 million new mobile phones were sold in India. Okay, these are crazy numbers. And what's also happening, of course, I heard a couple of people grunt when I mentioned Twitter. Change has been so rapid that it's hard to digest. You get used to one thing, another thing comes along. It's like, oh my God, what are we supposed to do with all this? Both personally and as an organization. How do we use video? How do we use audio? It's not enough that we have a website. Now we have to get our clients on the Google map. Like, Jesus, okay. So, change is so fast, it's hard to digest. And also, because we have all this stuff and we can all talk to each other, it creates a set of contradictions, that can be extreme. So I'll show you a couple of depressing slides right now, and I promise it'll be the first and last depressing slides of the day. So this is from an article in last year's, on a typical day in New York Times. This man is scavenging for food in a garbage dump in Port-au-Prince, and the little paragraph that caught my eye and stayed with me was this one. You can read it yourself, but basically that the only business booming in Haiti at this point last spring was the making and selling of patties made of mud, oil, and sugar. And so this man says, it's salty, it has butter, and you don't know what you're eating, dirt. It makes your stomach quiet down. So it's the kind of story that we open in the paper, we read about it, we keep on with our day, we thank the New York Times for spoiling our day, and then we just keep with our day. And so we're in a situation where I say we're in a special moment. We're in a moment where we have all this stuff. We have the UN, we have the World Food Program, we have all of us in this room, governments, and even things like Google and FedEx and stuff like that. And yet, people are eating mud. Or people, around here, half an hour from here, are not in the best of conditions. And so why is this? And we know it's complicated. There are all kinds of complicated reasons. But sometimes we feel it can be beside the point. I mean, this is an hour away from New York. Come on, can't we do better? And I think that deep down, we all know that we can do more. And so the question is how? And one small sort of thing to throw in here is that I think if you talk to a child, if you imagine a young child, 8, 9 years old, there's this age when you realize that you sort of become aware of the world, but you still don't really know that things are very complicated. And so you can imagine if an 8-year-old, 9-year-old, those who have kids or no kids, asking you a question like this. The kid comes to you and says, Mom, Dad, Uncle, I've been thinking, there are all these problems out there. You're good people, and so are the parents of most of my friends, so why can't all the good people in the world work together to fix this stuff? Pretty simple question. Now, of course, we are adults, and in fact, one of the sad things, if you think about it, is that if this little kid has a 13 or 14-year-old sibling, she or he would already say, it's great, not possible. It's complicated, and we know why it's complicated. All of us can be, good or bad, all of us can be annoying. People have egos, people have interests, people have different opinions, we have histories, we have conflicts, all these things that make collaboration difficult. I asked you a moment ago how many people are on Facebook. Lots of you raised your hand. I can ask you how many, think about it, even you and your sister don't get along sometimes. So I can ask you a different question. How many of you think that collaboration is easy? I think we'll get fewer hands in the room. So collaboration is hard, working together is hard, and so we spend our lives as adults with this weird sort of double knowledge. Our heads tell us that it's hard, that we're self-interested, that people have, again, egos, conflicts, all of that, scarcity, and yet our gut, our heart tells us we should be able to do more. I mean, we feel it sometimes, and then we come up against these obstacles again. So, what I sort of want to propose here, we want to propose, is that yes, these things are all true in general. The big picture is true, but what if we're actually wrong about the big picture? What if, in fact, and I'll put this text up there, what if there is a crack in this? If we just change the way we think about something here, in fact, there is a way of making and of doing much more with actually what's in this room, the world as a whole, but just this room, just this area, just the peninsula, just San Francisco, we can in fact do more. And I think what we need to do, and this is the thrust of this idea, is we have to shift a little bit at the way that we look at the world. When we, am I speaking too quickly? Is this okay? You're with me? Cool. Okay, so when we look at the world now, the typical way that we look at the world, almost literally, right? You get up in the morning, you open the paper, you go online, you put the TV on, you put the radio on, and you get this basically avalanche of problems that come at you, right? And this is true every day. It's become, unfortunately, even more true the last few months, but it's literally overwhelming. And it's one of the interesting sort of possibly negative side effects of this communication revolution, right? That we even hear about things that we wouldn't have heard years ago. A month ago, I was having lunch with a woman at a foundation in New York, and she said, yes, now I get up in the morning, and I hear about pirates off the coast of Somalia. Who knew a few years ago that was my problem too, first thing in the morning? So now we hear about everything, it's completely overwhelming, and it literally comes at us. So what I ask you to do for a moment in your imagination is to, if you think about this almost as a torrent of problems coming at you, actually stand aside for a second and sort of watch it going by. And just hear the silence for a moment, almost like a river. And instead of being in the middle, let's stand aside for a second. And if we do that, so we have all these problems coming at us. These problems are big and complicated, and we can't just get up and solve them. If we change our point of view and we stand aside, we can see three problems that we can focus on that are different. They cut across every issue and every community out there. They're true everywhere, I think. We can actually solve them. Each of us can get up in the morning and do something about them. And if we do, then all of our other problems will be easier to deal with. Okay, there are sort of these meta problems that we can actually get up and solve. And if we solve them, then everything else changes. Not only that, but you'll see in a moment, as opposed to all these issues that might separate us, these are three problems that hopefully we can actually all agree on as well. Okay? So what are these three big issues? The first one is that there's a huge gap, and we'll talk more detail in a moment about each of them, between our good intentions and our actions. This is true about everyone. I think everyone everywhere. Everything, by the way, from our personal lives. How often does it happen that you want to just hug someone and you sort of don't because it feels weird? And so there's a good intention, you don't actually act on it. All the way to watching the news, wanting to give, to help, to do. Lots of reasons why we actually sometimes don't cross that. And so the question is, how big is that gap? My sense is that it's actually huge. The second is that our problems are all connected. You know, poverty is connected to AIDS, connected to corruption, connected to all kinds of things. But we're not in a whole variety of ways. And lastly, is that the world is full of amazing ideas that have been realized in certain places, but don't flow quickly enough to others. Again, all of you, I think, have seen this in your work. So everything from a teacher that comes up with an amazing new way of teaching something, but how long does it take for other classrooms to hear about that idea, all the way to a new way of fundraising, all the way to a new way of managing, all the way to a new kind of well for a village somewhere. Lots of ideas, they don't flow quickly enough. By the way, at the end, I'll give you a URL where you can go online and read all this. If you don't want to write now, you don't have to. It's all online. I'll give you the URL at the end of the presentation, those of you who are writing. Okay, quickly. So, and last thing to say here, that everything I want to say now about these three things applies to individuals, but also to institutions. I know it's weird to sort of talk about the possibly good intentions of an institution, but it's true as well. Organizations have ideas or intentions they don't actually act on, sometimes for the simplest reason of all. No one has ever asked them, okay? But the intention is possibly there, they just don't act on it. So quickly on these three things. Let me just put it all up here so you can actually look while I'm talking. Basically every day, I think many of us would like to respond in some way to what we see around us. And it doesn't have to be pirates off the coast of Somalia. It can be something really small, something about our kids in school, something about even three people sharing an office somewhere, and the paint is peeling off the wall. And they all wish that someone would paint it, but they don't, okay? So every day, we wish for stuff, hope for stuff, would like to do something, and we don't. Now, we did a little brainstorming session with our staff once. We came up with like 70 different reasons, or obstacles, why people don't. There are a couple of little sort of code words that people use. People say, I don't have time, I'm lazy. It's actually much more complicated than that. It's a whole set of reasons, and it's not as simple as that. So people people have no time, no resources, no power, or very often they think they don't, which ends up coming to the same thing. Very few people don't have 2 minutes to do something. But you convince yourself that you don't, we convince ourselves that we don't, and then we don't. Lots of issues about where do I start? Not enough information. These days, by the way, I think for many people, in fact, too much information. You go to Google, you enter Haiti and hunger, you're like, oh my God, I'm going to do something else. Just too much, completely overwhelming. Overchoice can be completely paralyzing. Why bother? Huge one. It won't make a difference anyway. What's the point, basically? I'll maybe change something, it won't make a difference. And I'm afraid. Fear is a huge one, and it's the most unacknowledged one, basically. I'll be rejected, I'll be ridiculed, I'll fail, I'll lose face, etc. And so the intention doesn't get realized. Second one is that our problems are connected, but we're not. This is true, again, across a wide spectrum of situations. So think very quickly and very simply about two people living in two apartments in the same building. Somebody's on the 5th floor, somebody's on the 10th floor, or 3 houses away, 2 blocks away from each other, and they're looking down the window and they're seeing the same thing, the two of them. They're looking something that they would like to possibly change. An empty lot, let's make a garden, a corrupt policeman, a bad teacher. They're both thinking the same thing, but we're not telepathic, as humans. We don't know who's 5 floors upstairs thinking the same thing. And the thing is that 2 people together will do much, much more than one alone. You all know some people, a very small minority of people, I think, have the personality to get up in the morning and by themselves put leaflets under every door, organize their neighborhood. Some people do. Most people don't. 2 people are far more effective. Also, by the way, when you actually go and knock on someone's door, the average person will tend to think that 2 people are not as crazy as 1. Think about it. When 2 people come to you, it already looks, oh my God, at least they have 1 friend. Okay? It's not a wacko. That's an extremely helpful thing. And of course, you can motivate each other and partner and all of that. So the fact that you have, again, every day, I think, literally millions of people who would do something if they knew they're not alone. Now, you can extend that a little bit. Think about 5 women in some town in the Ukraine, 40,000 people in town. Those 5 women are in different corners of town, dreaming of possibly setting up the first women's center in town. They would, if they knew the other 4 are there. How do you start? Think about 10 business people somewhere paying protection money. And if the 10 were together, maybe they wouldn't. But how do you find the other 9, etc.? Then how do you find organizations to support you and all of that? So we're not connected. And there's, I alluded to this before. Sometimes you have an idea. Having a mechanism is not enough. You also need some kind of context, right? So think about it, those of you that participated in some way in the last election, you went around, some of you, and you knocked on doors, right? 2, 3, 4 months ago. You had a context, right? It was okay to knock on people's doors and say, hey, I'm here to talk to you about Sarah Palin. Are you okay with that? Or Barack Obama or whatever. And people would, talk to you. If you go now and knock on someone's door and say, hey, I want to talk about Barack Obama, they'll say, go away. So the context has changed, and context can be everything. So this happens, again, both outside and within every institution. Do you have permission? Do you have a sense of permission to ask, to challenge, to suggest? Or is there a general sense that it won't really be okay to say something? Okay? And then you tend to go into the bigger stuff. We humans tend to be, it seems, wired at this point, to be competitive, to be tribal. Any speaker could stand up here on the stage right now and divide you just like that into 2 groups and start playing a game. And if that person was skillful, within an hour, you guys would be going viciously at each other in that game. We tend to be competitive, we tend to form teams, and we tend to sort of focus on us. And this is true about organization, about company, about silos, about issues, all kinds of stuff like that. Lastly, this can be so deep in terms of how you grow up that it gets to the point where we, in fact, dehumanize the other. We're brought up in a certain way, we see someone who is different, and we don't even see the person anymore. We see black, we see white, we see Arab, we see Jew. We don't even see the person behind that anymore, okay? So we're not connected, our problems are. Moving right along, lastly, the world is full of good ideas that don't spread. This one, I don't have to say much about it. I think you're all aware of it. I mean, there's a wonderful idea somewhere, pretty useless unless you hear about it, pretty useless unless you have the resources to implement it. And if you have a wonderful idea, how do you push it out? If you think about it, there is no good mechanism, no good channel for the flow of good ideas within our sector. If you are an author and you write a book, any book, let's assume for a second, let's just assume that your book is a good book. When you find an agent, you find a publisher, your book gets published, your last worry as an author is how will that book reach the hands of readers, right? There's a pre-existing channel. It's already called a channel. They'll take your book and they'll push it into the channel, and lo and behold, next morning it's in every bookstore in the country. But if you have an amazing idea that is for the betterment of a neighborhood or a village or a town, what is your channel? How does it get to those who need it? There is no channel. So that's where we are, basically. That's the view that I think we're bringing here, a world, forget for a second these big issues, and let's focus on these 3 problems and what we can do about them. So, how do we do more? We take a sip of water. Are you more or less with me so far? Okay. So what do we do? So what do we do with all this? How do we make it easier to act on our actions and our intentions? How do we get more ideas to bubble up? The world is, again, full of people who want to do stuff. How do we bring it out? How do we raise the volume of action out there, and then make those connections. And how do we create a context where all this is possible? So the good news, I think, going back to the beginning of how many of you are on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on email, how much of the world is connected in so many different ways. And it's not just these, high-tech connections. It's television, it's cable, it's radio. I mean, we can actually have a global conversation now. It's possible. And not just about funny YouTube videos. We can actually have a serious global conversation about all kinds of things. And so we can do this now. And what we can know, and I know that first it's going to sound a little bit nutty, is that for the first time in history, we can actually build a global network, a movement, a community. This is not a website. We can actually build a movement, a community, an ecosystem that will serve and support all those people who want to make the world a better place. Now, what does that mean? We can create a network that will allow people and organizations everywhere to do these three things that go hand in hand with those three problems. We can all get better at imagining a better world, a better community, a better life. We can connect with others and with the stories and the inspiration that we need, ideas and resources, and we can then act on our good intentions, and this is crucial, help others to act on theirs. We have, I think, right now, everything we need to do this. We can do it tomorrow morning. We do have to agree on a couple of things. If we don't agree on a couple of things, it's not going to happen. And then we can actually do this. So here is those of you who have ever been part of any kind of coalition, you know there's a fundamental tension in any kind of coalition network. People in theory want to do more, people want to work together, but people then also go back to their own independent interests. And so the big challenge becomes, how do you actually make the most of what we have? So think for a second of some really effective networks that you know, and I know these examples are deliberately all over the place. The web, AA, ATMs, the world soccer players and those who love soccer. These networks are all ubiquitous, predictable, and useful, right? You land in a town anywhere, almost in the world now, and you can ask, where's the ATM, where's the AA meeting, where can I go play soccer, and where's the local internet cafe? And it's there. It's ubiquitous, it's useful, it's predictable. You know what it means. You know how to use an ATM. It works the same way everywhere. These networks are decentralized, they're adaptable, and they're unobtrusive. This is not a big McDonald's, in the middle everywhere. They're there, the great ones. And they're held together by, and this is the key, they're held together by what we can call just enough glue and not a drop more. The mistake that we often make when we try to work together is try to agree on too many things, and every bullet that we add, we lose someone, right? If you think about it, there's a really good reason why, for example, most environmental groups don't have a position on the death penalty. I mean, that'd be weird. They're trying to protect ducks. If they come out with a death penalty position, they'll lose N members. If they then add an abortion position, they'll lose more people. So, why should an environmental group come out with a position on gay marriage? I'm sure they have opinions, but the more bullets you add, the more people you lose. And that's true, that becomes very true about broad coalitions, such as we're trying to create here. And therefore you need the least possible glue and not more. And so when I mentioned, the web, AA, ATMs, soccer, what do these things have in common? They have a name, right? It's very convenient that when you land in that little town, you can say, where's the ATM? Where is the soccer league or football? But two names in this case. But basically, it has a name, and you can therefore find it. It has some very specific goals that we agree on when you land. And it has some rules. Soccer is played the same way. The ATM works fundamentally the same way. Some of those swallow your card, some of them don't, but basically it works the same way. And that's it. So, in this case, what can we propose here? If we want to create a network that will work together to address those three challenges, what do we need? We need a name. And here, I'm going to propose a name. We're going to propose a name. From my point of view, it could be any name. The point, though, I think, is that a name is helpful, again, for that very reason of landing somewhere and saying, where is that? Or, I read a little thing recently about some ultimate frisbee game between Google and Facebook people. And the reason they could both play ultimate frisbee is because they call it the same thing, right? So they can actually connect around that. So, a name we can use. And here, you sort of find a fascinating thing. All of you in this room have identities. You're teachers, you're directors, you work for a nonprofit. And again, names are magical, right? You sit beside somebody on the plane, and you say, I'm the executive director of a nonprofit. And she says, oh, I'm the ED of a nonprofit too. And in 3 words, you've summarized a lifetime. You don't even have to rant. You've just like said it all right there. So names sort of work. And what you find in the world today now is a really interesting thing, that all over the world, you meet these people and you know when you meet them, we live in a world where all people, where you can find people everywhere who share these 3 basic sort of fundamental values. People who want to live in a world where all people, not just their people, all people can live a free and dignified life. People who believe that together we can do more, and people who would be happy to do their part in the spirit of generosity, mutual respect. I would also add humor, people who like laughing. But basically, so this is sort of a set of values, they're everywhere. Another way, by the way, personally, of thinking about this is think, if you were stuck tomorrow for a year or 2 on an island somewhere, who are the 50 people that you would take with you for a year or 2, okay? So actually, I think they would pretty much correspond to these sort of drier bullets up there. It's not an ideological thing, it's a point of view, and it's a way of acting in the world. Now, what we're going to propose, again, as a tool or as an identity, is let's give these people a name, and from our point of view, let's call people idealists, at least for a bit, and see what we can do with that. Let's take that word and brand it. Let's make it mean someone who sees something that's wrong and wants to fix it, and someone who believes these 3 things, and let's pull them out. So let's just put it on the table for a moment and come back to that in a bit. Keep moving right along. So, a few goals we can agree on. This is quick because it comes straight from what I said earlier. I think that we can agree, regardless of all kinds of opinions that we have on all kinds of issues, that we want to make a world that is, where people can have free and independent lives everywhere, where we can make it easier for people and organizations to move from intention to action in a whole variety of ways. And the how almost doesn't matter. Once we pose it as a question, there are a zillion ways of answering that question. And we'll get to that if we can. We want to connect people, organizations, and resources in every possible way. And we want to find good ideas wherever they are and distribute them as widely as possible. And so, you know, I only have 2 minutes to go, and by the time I'm done, I'm going to leave you with more questions and answers. But the kind of thing that I want to sort of plant in your mind is that if you think of a typical coalition building meeting. So there's a funder out there, you know, when funders call, we come. There's a funder, the funder calls her 20 grantees that are all in the peace movement business. So, or women's movement, or environmental movement, it doesn't mind. And the funder has decided you must collaborate, you will collaborate. So they all come and they have this collaboration day. And as usual, as often happens, the agenda is about the issues of that field, okay? And very soon you find out that it's actually hard because people have different opinions, different agendas, different priorities, and it's very difficult to come out of a day like that. I think people are nodding. I think you've all been in days like that. It's hard to come out. Of course, coalitions do work sometimes, but it's hard to come out from a day like that with a really sort of amazing agenda that we all agree on. A completely different agenda for a day like that is to bring those 20 peace groups or 20 women's groups into that room and say, we have a different agenda for you today. We're in fact not going to talk about the issues of peace or women's issues, for example. This is a different kind of day. What we're going to do here today in San Francisco with the 20 women's groups in the room, we are going to figure out how we make sure that every single woman in San Francisco who wants to do something for women, or every single person that wants to do something for women, knows about at least one of you by the end of the month. That's what this day is about. Now just think about that for a second. That's a completely different kind of brainstorming. Much more fertile, much more interesting. Oh my God, we could have a fair. We could have a book where each of us would get a page. We could have an 800 number where somebody could say 3 words and the right group would pop up. So that's a completely different kind of thing than arguing about issues. It's a productive conversation that has to do with, and it's aligned, everyone wants to be known by more people, and we can all do it together. And so these kind of goals are goals that we can agree on instead of specific issues. Quickly, a few rules. These rules, again, every network, every coalition needs some rules. These are the rules that we've been using in Idealist now for 13 years, I think, and they work. They keep the really sort of bad stuff out, and they bring all the good stuff in. So the simple rule that we have is no violent or illegal action. No action against anyone based on who they are. So no hatred, basically, no hate stuff. No action against anyone based on their identity. And lastly, the belief, the really strong belief, that anyone, anywhere should be able to take action for their issues in their community. So if there's one thing that we can all agree on, is that any person anywhere should be able to take peaceful action to improve their community within these two very simple rules. Lastly, two last sort of concepts here. In order to create this kind of network, we just have to throw a couple of last concepts. One is to distinguish between two different kinds of action out there in the world. There are actors out there in the world, all of us, I think, and we can change our hats every day. And there are connectors, right? There are people who like playing basketball, and there are people who will organize the first basketball tournament in their school ever. There are people who like reading, and there are people who will start a book club. And all of us can change those roles every time. Some of us can be actors in the morning, connectors in the afternoon, but it's important to distinguish between those two roles, because if we want to facilitate more connections, more action, more ideas flowing, many, many people are going to be happy to act if they're invited to the party, if they're invited to the potluck, but someone has to put the potluck together. It's important to make that distinction because we're going to need connectors. And CompassPoint, for example, is a huge connector, but we need both individuals and organizations that are going to be in the business of actually making these connections. And lastly, and this is where the sort of conceptual part ends, is that for a network like this to succeed, for this kind of movement to succeed, we have to come to people everywhere in the four ways that all of us are used to living our life right now, or acting in every way. If you think of anything, travel, eating, reading, playing, we work alone sometimes. My mom used to have this sign on her kitchen that said, I love humanity, it's people I can't stand. So people might want to actually get involved, but they might want to work alone, and that's fine. You know, let me take care of animals, not people. Okay, fine. So somebody might want to act alone, act with others, online or in person. So these four options, we have to give people those options. Like in a couple of minutes, act over a year. Work online, again, there's so many ways of working online now we don't have to get into. And lastly, but really important, when you go to sort of any town in the world of a certain size, there are a certain set of institutions that you expect to find. You expect to find a school, a grocery store, a police station, a house of worship, etc. Why isn't there a place that you can walk into and say, I want to make the world a better place. I want to make this community a better place. What are my options? So of course, community centers exist out there, but this is more than that. You want to walk into one place and say, how can I help the kids in the school? Or what can I do about Darfur? What are my options? Help me out here. And that place would act as a connector between organizations and people that want to basically do anything. Call those things community points or whatever, but a place where people can actually physically come together. So, in 5 minutes, how are we going to actually do this? So, if you go all the way with this idea of a network, and a truly decentralized network, and those of you, I think, who you've used the internet, all of you, a lot of what's on the web today was not predicted 10 years ago. When you want to create a decentralized network, really at some point, all you can do is start. Once the basic structure is there, people will find all kinds of interesting ways of doing this. So, how do we start? We're going to do, basically, this is the last slide, actually. Next week, what we're going to do is, we're going to take this idea that I more or less shared with you right now, and I know it's fake, that's okay. We're going to share it with the world. We're going to go out, Idealist right now has about 1 million registered users. We're going to go to our users and say, here's this idea. In a very transparent way. We're going to say, no, this is a product, here's a finalized website or thing, use it, buy it. No, here's this idea. First of all, before we waste any time, before we take any risks, what do you think? What do you think about this? Does this make sense to you? Does this make sense to you in your village in Uganda? Does this make sense to you in your town in Palo Alto? Does this make sense? What do you think? And also, what can you add to this from your point of view? So we're going to spend a few weeks simply enriching it, clarifying it, refining it in a very iterative process, using all this amazing stuff that we have now, video, audio, radio, whatever, but to really have a global conversation of what can we actually do together and do it multilingually. So first of all, put it out there and share it. And again, in a very sort of low risk, very small step here. Second, after a few weeks of doing that, we're going to try to get to a certain critical mass, not huge, doesn't need to be huge, by asking people to take a very small step, which is, again, we understand it's a new thing, people want to take things slowly, and so simply take a couple of steps. Does this thing overall appeal to you? Okay, maybe yes, maybe no. If yes, sure, sign up and tell a few other people. And let's see what do we get to it. It'll be very, very different to feel that in San Francisco, we have 50 people who want to find a way of solving these three problems, or that we have 5,000 people or 30,000 people. You can do a completely different thing. So what can we get to in a few weeks of simply, quietly building critical mass online? And then the whole thing comes together. Now, unfortunately, I'm sort of out of time right now. So what I'll do is, I'm really unfortunately out of town, but you will, if you want, and you, as we said, you're all online, we can actually do this right now. And to do it, if you want to go later, if you go to ideas.org/more, you will find a little document that does a far better job than I did here now, describing the idea, but also the steps to actually realize it. What you'll find right now is just a document. It'll take you 10 minutes to read it. If you come there at the end of next week, you'll find the whole mechanism for beginning to be involved in actually saying what you think, making it happen, expressing yourself. But if you go there this afternoon or whenever, you'll find the actual idea there. So I'm sorry I couldn't do more this morning. I'm sorry I couldn't hear what you think. But my email address is there as well. So if you want to take a read, take a look, drop me an email. I always read my email. Please do. Thank you so much for listening. Time went by really quickly.